Ever feel like you're a kite tugging at the string, just yearning for that open sky?
Mm-hmm.
But that's kind of how young Manjiro feels in A Heart of a Samurai, right?
Right.
He's left Japan behind, which back then, huge deal.
Yeah, huge.
And he's boarded this whaling ship, the John Howland. Talk about a leap into the unknown.
Oh, yeah. He's right in the thick of it, too. This chapter doesn't mess around.
No kidding.
It's not just the adventure, though. It's more than that. Like, he's wrestling with freedom guilt, the weight of choices. That's got to be pretty universal. We
Yeah.
can all relate to that, right?
Well, absolutely. Like that feeling when you're exhilarated but terrified at the same time.
Exact.
Most of us have felt that. You don't have to be lost at sea.
Nope. And the author uses this incredible kite metaphor, and it's so much more than just a pretty image, too.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
So Manjiro compares himself to a kite that's cut free from its string. What's the deeper meaning there?
Well, I mean, on the surface, yeah, it's that feeling of soaring.
Yeah.
Experiencing a freedom he's never known. I mean, think about it. This is a boy from a small fishing village, and suddenly, boom, he's on a ship going to America.
Wow, yeah.
But then, like you said, there's that vulnerability there, too. That untethered feeling that comes with such a drastic change. It's like he's cut off from everything he knows, adrift in this vast, unfamiliar world.
And it's so interesting that he even mentions watching a kite fly away when he was a child and wondering what it would experience. It's almost like he willed this journey to happen.
It's like he's tempting fate. And now that he's living it, there's no turning back.
And if that wasn't enough turmoil, there's Jolly.
Oh, man.
Talk about a dark cloud hanging over the journey. Now, for anyone who hasn't gotten to this chapter yet, Jolly's this crewmate who wrongly accused Manjiro of theft earlier in the story.
Yeah.
So how does that unresolved conflict add to his anxiety about the journey ahead?
Well, think about it. You're sailing further and further from home, right?
Right.
And you have this looming fear of confrontation hanging over you.
It's like that feeling when you know you have to have a difficult conversation.
Yeah.
You just keep putting it off. The anticipation is almost worse than actually having the conversation.
Exactly. And in Manjiro's case, this unresolved tension, it's amplified by his circumstances. He's surrounded by people he doesn't know, can't communicate with, and one of them represents a very real threat.
And then on top of all that, he's carrying around this huge secret, the captain's watch. He's wrestling with whether to return it or not, and it's clearly eating away at him. This isn't just some lost and found situation.
Oh, definitely not. It's something much deeper.
Yeah.
Remember earlier when we were looking at those discussion questions, and one of them asked about the significance of objects?
Right.
Well, this is it. That watch is linked to truth and honesty. And Manjiro, he desperately wants to clear his name, but he's terrified of what'll happen if he tries to.
Yeah, it's like that classic dilemma. Do you follow your conscience or protect yourself? What would you do?
It's a tough one. And this internal struggle that he's having gets even more complicated when Manjiro overhears the crew talking about Jolly.
Oh, right. This is where it takes a turn.
Yeah.
Manjiro learns that Jolly's not actually on the ship anymore.
Right. And they're all saying he got into some trouble. Before they even set sail, actually. Might have drowned.
Oh, wow.
So imagine that emotional roller coaster, right?
Yeah.
He goes from fearing this guy to potentially feeling responsible for what happened.
Guilt and relief all rolled into one. That's a lot for anyone to process, let alone a young boy who's far from home.
And this is where the theme of responsibility really takes center stage. For Manjiro, it's not just about this watch anymore. He's grappling with the weight of unintended consequences. This is where it becomes something much deeper.
Yeah, it's a lot to carry around, all that guilt, the watch, and he's still got that journey ahead of him. It's interesting you bring up the watch again, because now we're at that scene where he climbs high up the mast of the ship. So he's literally and figuratively above the deck now, surrounded by nothing but sky and sea. It's almost like a physical representation of that kite feeling.
You're right. Like he's seeking a different perspective, a moment of solace maybe. And it's in this precarious place that he decides to finally look at the watch.
It's like he needs that isolation, to be away from everything and everyone so he can confront what's in his hands. Remember that other podcast we talked about how being in nature makes people want solitude?
Yeah, definitely.
This really seems like that.
It does. And remember, this isn't just any object. This watch, it's a symbol of authority, a connection to the captain. And like we talked about, it represents truth and honesty.
And Manjiro's just naturally curious, too. He's got to know more about this watch, this thing from a culture so different from his own. He's trying to figure out what it means, why it's so important to the captain. Almost like he's trying to find a bridge between those two worlds.
And that's the really sad part. Because just as he might be getting somewhere, Fate steps in.
This is the part I couldn't put down. So the ship lurches, and, well, let's just say it doesn't end well for the watch.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Can you imagine how awful that moment must have been for him? He's so high above the ocean, holding this thing that connects him to the captain, and then, poof, it's gone.
It's symbolic, right? I mean, the ocean, it represents so much freedom and possibility, and now it's swallowed up this secret, this thing that's been weighing him down.
It's heartbreaking. He was trying to do the right thing, to understand. But now he's got this huge loss to deal with. And it's not just the watch. It's his guilt, the fear of what'll happen if the captain finds out.
This is where I think we need to talk about how this affects Manjiro emotionally. The author doesn't hold back on showing us just how much this loss hurts.
You're right. He's already feeling so isolated, guilty about Jolly, and now this. It's like the author's really piling on the burdens to show us just how much strength it takes to survive a journey like Manjiro's. Think about it. He's young, he's alone in a place he doesn't know, can't even speak the language, and now he's lost something incredibly important. It would be so easy to just give up, right?
Oh, totally. But there's a little bit of hope too, don't you think? Because this is awful, losing the watch, but it kind of forces him to face things head on.
Yeah.
No more hiding. He has to make a choice.
Yeah.
Tell the truth, let the fear win, or find a way to move forward with all of this on his shoulders.
That's what makes this chapter, and the whole book actually, so interesting. It's more than just a boy on a ship. It's about resilience. It's about the choices we make when things are really, really hard. What would you do if you were Manjiro?
Honestly, I have no idea. It's easy to say we'd all be brave, but when you're actually staring into the unknown, who knows? But maybe that's the point, This chapter, all of this that happens to Manjiro, it makes us look at some tough stuff about ourselves. It makes us ask, what risks are we willing to take, to be honest? How do we deal with guilt and responsibility when things get messy?
And don't forget the cultural piece of it, too. Manjiro's stuck between two worlds with two sets of values. He's trying to figure out the captain, the crew, this whole new world he's in, and this whole thing with the watch. That's like a tiny version of that struggle.
It's true, like a ripple effect. This one event, it means so much more than what happens on the ship. It makes us think about understanding other cultures, about secrets and what they do to us, and about having the guts to face what we've done, even when we're scared and unsure. It's like he's got the weight of two completely different cultures on him, And he's trying to make them both fit somehow. His own ideas of what's right and wrong, and then this new world with its own rules.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. He's kind of in this weird in-between place where the old rules don't really apply anymore. It's like uncharted territory, and that's where he's got to figure out what to do.
And there are no easy answers here. Does he tell the captain he lost the watch, even though his reputation's already messed up and the captain might be furious? Or does he keep quiet, knowing that he's hiding something and might get caught?
And we can't forget this isn't just a random thing he lost either. It's about trust, about understanding. We talked about the watch being a symbol of truth and honesty, but it's also how Manjiro and the captain connect, in a way.
Makes you wonder what would have happened if he'd been able to give it back. Could that have closed the gap between their cultures somehow?
It's possible, right? We'll never know for sure. But what we do know is that this whole thing, just this one thing with the watch, it tells us something that's true for everybody. We all screw up, even when we're trying our best. It's how we handle those mistakes that shows who we really are.
That's what gets me about this book. It's not just a cool story. It's about those big questions, about figuring out who you are when the world feels huge and unforgiving. It makes you think, what would I be willing to give up? What's so important to me that I'd never betray it?
And isn't that what makes a story stick with you? When it makes you look at your own life and wonder what you would do.
Totally. This part especially leaves you with so much to chew on. Honesty, guilt, having the guts to face something new. Those are things we all deal with.
For sure. And they're definitely going to keep coming up as we follow Manjiro on his journey. But for now, that question's still hanging in the air. How do we know what's right and wrong? Especially when different cultures are involved and our choices have so much power.
It makes you really look at yourself and try to understand what your own values are, why you do what you do. And maybe, just like what Manjiro's doing, we all have to go through our own tough times and uncertainty. But maybe, if we try to be honest and understand each other, even when it's hard, maybe that's like a light in the dark.